Hi, this is Amanda.
And this is Jen.
And you're listening to Just This, a podcast that explores everything around being and becoming a mother or parent.
We're excited to have you join us as we dive into the practical details as well as the unseen energetics on topics that span from preconception to years after birth.
Hey Pod Fam, welcome back. This is Amanda. And today we have a little bit of a different episode for you than our normal format and chit chats we've had. Jen and I this is just more of an open discussion. And it was around just relating to some popular topics that are in our world, as well as just where we are in life as parents. And you'll hear in this, it's really wonderful. We dive into doing and being, both around parenting, because we both experience there's a lot of advice out there and a lot of doing before thinking about the being or the intention. And then we relate it just to life and some of the things we're going through. It was recorded about a month ago, so during the eclipse season, we just felt it was really potent for us. So I hope you enjoy this. I do mention a quote in there. I'm going to read the quote now. I finally found it. And the quote itself is a little bit confusing now that I re-listened to it, but hopefully this whole conversation will open up this quote and we dive deeper into it. And it's from this podcast episode from Catherine Zankino, which is linked in the show notes, the episode if you do want to listen to the full thing. But she says, I always laugh at that question whenever someone asks me what they need to do to be. If there's a doing that leads to a being, when the ultimate goal is being, there is no doing to the being. It's just the being. All right, I'll leave you with that and enjoy the episode. Okie dokie. Today we're going to talk about doing versus being as kind of our framework.
Doing versus being.
Yeah.
And Amanda up with this topic, so
I felt inspired by this topic because I think it's really relevant for both of us on a personal note right now where we are just in our life journey. Mm-hmm. I had reached out to you randomly and you had said, I'm doing all the things. I'm running into so much resistance. And randomly, I'm working with some families right now that I hear the same thing. I'm doing all the things and running, quote unquote, they're running into resistance, right, with a baby. I had heard this quote from a podcast, which I will share in the show notes. Catherine Zankina had a podcast episode, and she had this quote around the doing and being thing, and it was a great quote, and I can't remember it right now, so I'll find the quote and put it in the show notes. We could start on a personal note, or we could dive into the doing and the being parts of parenthood.
Well, okay, let's first define doing versus being. I think we should start there.
Okay, I think this is a great place to start the definition because I think this is also a very hot topic in the manifestation world or anywhere, actually, not even manifestation, like leadership. Everything these days is all about, it's not about what you do, it's who you be. Right? Mm-hmm. And that's an easy statement to make. And there's truth in it. But what does it mean? And mm-hmm. I also think they're very interconnected. And I think there's a balance and a dance. And our world is very much weighted on the doing. Like if you do this, this, and this, that will lead to this. Kind of these equations. We have our to-do lists that we need to do every day. And one's yin and one's yang. So I'd love to hear your take on this whole thing from a Chinese background philosophy, mm-hmm. because I'm sure you do have some very valuable insights there. And you need both. You need the doing and the being. But we overemphasize, right? If you're just constantly looking at the doing, and this quote really highlighted this, which again, I wish I had the quote, which I'll find. But if you're doing something from a place where you're not being that person, being that identity, then it doesn't mm-hmm. matter, like where it's falling flat, right? Doing is I swaddle my baby when I put them to bed. I wake my baby up every 2 hours if we're talking about parenting. I
What would the being be in those examples?
I am being the best I can be to show up for
Mm-hmm.
this baby in the moment, right? And that might mean you do a swaddle, and it might mean you realize, oh, tonight or this moment, this actually isn't working, right? But if you're coming from a place of being, your action of doing is going to look different and also have different intention going into it. I think when you're a being too, we naturally release the outcome more. It's like I'm being this way, and therefore I'm going to be this way regardless of what happens, right? When we're doing something, we usually want an end result
Mm-hmm.
where being is not attached to an end result.
Right.
And I'm being more alert right now, or I'm being the role of a mother right now more than this because that's what I'm choosing to be. Whatever it is, if you choose to have more support at night or during the day, whatever it is with your child, you're making the choice, but you need to make your choice from a place of being and who you're identifying as versus what came to me specifically around parenting is we get so much advice of do this, do that, do this. You're going to get a million and
Mm-hmm.
two different opinions of what you should do.
Right.
And if you identify who you be as a parent, as a mother, as a person, that can help you tune into the actions that are actually your actions, not those from the noise around
Mm-hmm.
you. Doing is the action, and being, I think, is the energy and the identity of the place you're coming from. And reflecting on this and talking through it, I think a big difference is attachment to the end goal.
A good maybe example too is sleep, right? Like sleep training. You're doing all the steps to sleep train your baby at some point, but then like it's not working. The sleep training is essentially not working. Then how would you be in those situations?
Yeah, and that depends on your identity. Do you identify as a working mom? Are you already back at work? You have to tune into who you are, what you identify as to like what the best thing to do at that point is going to, where the next forward movement will be. Your actions should be dependent on the being versus the doing. And I see a lot of people, and this makes sense when you enter motherhood, your identity is shape shifting so much. It can be really hard to identify your identity, the being of you. Who you're being really is going to dictate those choices in how you approach what you're doing or anything. So who are
Yeah.
you going to be? Like, how are you going to show up? And oftentimes I find when people lean back into the being, the right action comes or something out of thin air, like comes to their mind and then they try it. Even and then that, again, going back into the surrender, it's like by doing nothing, by being, all of a sudden things resolve. It just might need time. I find that there is magic in the being versus the doing first. This quote, it really kind of highlights this of when you're doing something without defining the being, it's like, it's again, what's the point of the doing? Not to say that doing without being can be pointless task, but it kind of comes back to that sometimes, you know?
Yeah. As parents, we can get into the doing of, oh, I need to do the dishes and the laundry and all those things have to get done. But then we're not creating space or time to be a parent or enjoy parenthood
Or
sometimes.
be someone that is taken care of for a little bit. Be
That's a
someone
good
that
one.
can receive the support of others.
Yes. I find that so interesting. It's so hard for people to be taken care of.
Mm-hmm.
Like you said, like the control aspect of it. So it's very interesting. And how are we going to relate this to like life right now in the
Well, I think you should relate it to life. What are you doing? How are you being?
I'm doing everything they say, Amanda.
Yeah.
In
And
all this.
I think this is where I don't know when this episode's going to come out, hopefully somewhat soonish, but we are entering into the solar eclipse and I've felt this energy for the last like couple of months at least. There's a lot of to me need to pull back and not do right now. Just
And
or
not do.
be very intentional in our doing. What are we intentionally doing and having it come from a state of being versus this is the end goal I want to get to. So I'm doing all the things I'm supposed to do. And
Mm-hmm.
it's not working.
Yeah, I mean, I think
And
that's where I'm at in life, where it's like, okay, they say to do this, this, and this, and I'm doing all those things. And we had a talk, and you're just basically, you need to let it go. Just let it go. You put it out there. You're still taking action, but it's almost like the action's too obsessive, almost like maybe doing too much instead of, you said, stepping back and just being in the moment in the process.
well, let's take an example for business, just to throw it out there. You're starting a business, a different kind of
Mm-hmm.
business. Okay, I'm choosing to be the identity of this business owner. It doesn't matter
Mm-hmm.
what happens or where things go. It's if you're living in that day in, day out,
Mm-hmm.
obstacles or no obstacles, the intention of what you're doing might change.
That's the thing. Like, I feel I do that, like be that and be in that
Mm-hmm.
moment.
When you look at most successful business owners, like we all go through ups and downs. Most loving parents all go through ups and downs. What is the core at the being of who they are as they go through that, right? It's not like you
Yeah.
need to do more. It's how are you responding to it and
How are
how.
you? Yes, that's true.
And I
Responding
heard
to it.
another really interesting quote recently about reaction versus response. And I
Mm-hmm.
think this goes into the doing versus being in a just reflective way. When you're reacting, that is a doing. When you're responding, that is a being.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, and I mean, I think this
Mm-hmm.
goes, it's to say, so reaction versus response is just that's how we do or be in accordance to stimulus in our life or triggers or things coming at us. And I
Mm-hmm.
mean, there's things that we can also creatively wellspring how we do or be. That is a really, I think, important one to look at, especially as a parent with a baby or a toddler or a teenager, wherever it is. Again, coming back to that core of being, how are you responding versus reacting? How are you
Mm-hmm.
responding to this versus reacting? That and response comes from the core of being. Who am I choosing to be as a person? And what would be the response to this?
Right. Most
Sometimes the response
likely.
isn't even outwardly to say anything. Sometimes the response is like an inward reflection. How am I choosing to compose myself given this stimuli, given this interaction, given this other being, this
Mm-hmm.
challenge, whatever it is? How am I choosing to compose myself and relate to it
Mm-hmm.
versus what I'm actually doing?
That makes
You don't
sense.
seem like you have much to say about this topic.
I'm like, I know, I'm just trying to grasp how to define this difference. Actually, like as we're
This
talking
is a
more,
good
it's like
example. You're trying too hard. You're trying too hard.
to
It's
like
almost like
grasp.
I am trying to be too hard. What can I do to be? I see you struggling with it internally, and I see you grasping, like you just gotta release.
Yeah. The other thing I have to say, circling back, you're responding versus reacting. There is a phase where you become aware of your reactions to things. You react, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, yeah, I'm not that person. I'm not being the person that I want to be. So then it's like it shifts over. I feel that, especially for me, and it sounds like in your recent past, you're kind of in the same situation where you're in between that phase. So it feels maybe like you're reacting to things, but then you're catching yourself shortly after.
We're just gonna be doing a coaching call here. Okay. So I was very much in the space of where you were. And I think when you tune into, you're very intuitive and you have connection to your intuition. And when
Mm-hmm.
you tune into what you're really wanting right now, it's probably not to set up a sales page and da, 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 da. I'm sure there is an element that wants that, but why? Really, if you're being asked to pause, I had a laundry list of, I still do, 2.5 million things like I could do to move the needle forward with whatever. And I just knew I just need to take things day by day. I was like, fuck this big picture stuff. Big picture is great, but I just got so overwhelmed, chokingly overwhelmed. I have this deep feeling that just there's circumstantial things shifting, and I've already
Mm-hmm.
experienced this where it's like, why the fuck make plans or why try so hard when this thing
Yeah.
might look totally different in 6 months, either personally or from some just circumstances around me. My approach was, first of all, just day by day, literally day by day. I'm doing this today. I'm doing that today. I'm doing this to just keep moving forward, like one foot in front of the other. also creating space, just releasing the outcome. I have no idea. And that scared the shit out of me. It scares the shit out of everyone. No human really likes to walk into the unknown, especially when they don't feel a sense of security or safety in
Right.
our society, and there's financials wrapped into that. But think of this as you're like entering labor. You know, I don't know if you're in early stages or late stages, but you are fucking in labor.
I
And
think
you're
I'm
like,
transitioning.
what do I do? How do I get the fucking baby out? Like, give me the baby out. The midwife is like, surrender,
Surrender.
release, let
Yes,
go,
let go.
stop worrying about the baby coming out. The baby will
Transition.
fucking come, right?
I've
And
been at it forever though. How much longer?
exactly, right? You know, we know, we've been there. You've been there. You've walked through this with so many people, and yet it's really hard to remember for ourselves that
Mhm.
this is life. Like birth is life. Like we are
Yeah.
going through these contractions and expansions and contractions and expansions all the time. And if the more you can just let it crack you open, the better it's going to come. And there's going to be times when you're screaming and I can't do it anymore,
Hmm.
right? and
Yes, we
then
have those moments.
and then there's times when you're like, I got this, I'm in the flow. And then there's times where there's just all these waves, and then you reach the euphoria of getting over the hump. And then we go through it all over again, whether we're
Yes,
having another baby or not. We're doing this over and over in our fucking
constant.
lives. We
So true.
chose to do this. This is why we're here, people.
I think
What
if
was
we
the question?
do bring this, if we can wrap it, maybe this is helping a little bit grasp my mind around this. From a parent perspective, I think that as parents, like you said, we get caught up in doing and in trying to do what is right as opposed to just
Mm-hmm.
being our true, authentic
Yeah.
mother that we are, or father that we are, however we
And
identify.
coming back to you, because I feel like you need the love right now. When we get in these periods of life where we do have the space to breathe, we have the space to rest, instead of honoring it and being like, oh, cool. A lot of us are like, oh, fuck, what do I do? What do I do? Because that's what we've been taught and brainwashed, that we
Yeah.
have to constantly be doing.
Yeah.
And not to say I have really been playing with my relation to energy and movement
Hmm.
recently, and had these amazing insights of how doing things, all this energetic movement's connected. And so by doing one thing, maybe that it moves like your
Yeah.
energy fields, whereas something else completely unrelated all of a sudden happens. But
Hmm.
it's because I'm moving this energy field, right? So yes, we need to do things. But I think we live in a place of we don't slow down enough, and we don't pause enough, and we don't tune into who do I want to be and what's my intention in doing this.
Yeah. It's so interesting that you say that, because that was the thing. The other day, I was just, okay, I have some time. I should be focusing on getting like all these things done, setting up the sales page or whatever. Hurdle after hurdle after hurdle, stopping me, pretty much just like creating more stress. And even as a mom, I remember this too. Oh, okay, baby's finally sleeping. Let me get up and clean the house, even though like I might have been
Mm-hmm.
exhausted and could have used a nap. But that idea of letting go and doing kind of nothing and just being in
Mm-hmm.
our space, like you said. And it's interesting, some of the people that I follow and listen to, they say that same thing. If we allow ourselves that space, maybe we have this like huge epiphany and it totally unlocks everything.
I
And,
want to highlight this doing nothing. Oftentimes we call it doing nothing. Reading a book isn't doing nothing. Watching a
right.
TV show isn't doing nothing. You're giving
Yes.
yourself a fucking break. Taking a bath isn't doing nothing. There's
Nothing.
really very little that we're doing nothing. And I also want to reflect back to you. You did tell me this is the first time ever in your whole life, I'm not going to say how many years, that you have been living alone for a
Yeah.
week.
Mm-hmm.
What
Mm-hmm.
the fuck? Like, yeah, your body's probably like, let's fucking make some popcorn.
Yeah.
We're gonna take a bath. I don't know, set up the candles and do some sensual time with ourselves.
Yes.
Whatever. Your body has been waiting. Your soul has been waiting. How
Right.
long for that? So
Mm-hmm.
I
So
just
true.
want to acknowledge, and again, coming back to that self-care, often when we think of, hey, I'm going to sleep. For sleep, that was a thing. I hit this crazy sleep deprivation point. I started having a breakdown, I think around 4 or 5 months. And my doing was allowing myself to sleep the first nap the baby slept. I was actually working at that point with clients. My doing was adjusting my schedule. And that's a big fucking do. I mean, that was a
Yeah.
very challenging one for me to ask others to adjust their schedule and their needs based on what I needed. And really, they had no problem. We've discussed this in other episodes doing it, but it was an edge. And I think that's another thing I want to bring up is we all have our own inner blocks, and there's going to be things that feel really edgy and scary to us. Letting go of the cliff you're hanging on to is going to feel scary, and sometimes you need to do it.
Definitely.
And letting go is an action. When you're hanging on and holding on so tightly, letting go is the chosen action. So that is doing something. So.
Yeah, that's so true, actually. And I think too, I just want to pop in that in those times where it's hard to let go, sometimes just shifting our focus so that we're not focusing on that is a great way to let it go. Cause like, okay, I'm gonna let this go. I'm gonna let this go. And it's like,
yeah,
you just like your mind.
Yeah, it's like what you're doing. You're trying to do your way into being. I'm like, you can't do it. You can't.
And the other thing too, I just want to, point out is this whole idea, that guilt of taking that time to myself, what is too much, and all those type of things come into. And I don't know if that came up for you when you were dealing with shifting your schedule and stuff like that, but I don't know your thoughts on that.
I 100% did. And I think this also leads into a statement I want to make. The world needs to lean into more of this feminine receptivity, rest and relax, embracing that. But mothers particularly, I think, get the shaft. Our society, at least in the world we live in, is not really set up to support the work of being a mom and also the self-care. I mean, and this is for anyone, moms or non-moms, like the self-care it takes to like show up and do the work you do in the world. And that's important. That's important, and it's not highlighted, and it doesn't take a priority the way it should. And it's up to us to change that. Our little decisions and how we show up, just simple things you don't realize, if you're making that decision, somebody else who sees you make that decision, that can give them the permission to do it too. And that's where things can have a ripple effect.
And it's interesting. It made me think of this person and I'm sorry, I don't know who it was, but they were talking about for them to show up in the world, like these are the things that they need to be able to show up at work and be fully present for the people and to also be present for their family and their friends. And then also for themselves. Just hearing that kind of gave me permission to self-care is okay. And that's going to look different for everybody. Not everybody needs to meditate and go for a walk in nature, but maybe they need to go to the gym or whatever else, have a cup of tea. I don't know.
Coming back to movement and my whole relation to movement, I've always bonded with physical movement. That brings me joy in life. I lean into that as a coping mechanism. So there is a very interesting physical movement and energetic movement, like the actions we physically take and the actions we're energetically taking, and how those do have ripple effects. But there's that balance of move your body and don't use it as a distraction. So it's like everything, the balance, move and don't move.
I mean,
the middle way, the middle path, everything down the middle.
I mean, there's movement and stillness too, right? It's just very micro movement. Even if you just sit down, you'll notice your body sways a little bit. It's not like an intentional sway, but it does move. I mean, we're on a planet that is moving crazy speeds across the solar system and stuff. But so there's movement there too. One of my favorite is just dancing. Whatever my body feels the movement it needs to like let out whatever this energy is. And sometimes it'll be with music. Sometimes it's just whatever it's feeling. The other thing I want to reflect about a little bit is kind of this idea of the time that we take to self-reflect. And when things come up with our kids that bring up emotional feelings, maybe triggers in us from our own, that is also work too, right? Because we're working on ourselves, changing sometimes, although it doesn't have to be hard, it can be challenging sometimes. Those changes that have been with us since childhood and then all of a sudden we're shifting, that is actually a lot of work too. And it's a big shift and can sometimes make us feel more tired or like need more of that self-care, softness time. And
that's a huge one. And I find especially in those first few years, because oftentimes in society we're around children and we can reflect or have awareness of how we relate to them. But it's not often we're around babies unless we work with babies, right?
Mm-hmm.
And especially that first year when a baby cries, your baby's cry is going to tug at your heart a little bit different than another baby's cry. But it can bring up a lot of trauma, and it can bring up a lot of triggers that we're like totally not even conscious of. So 100% agree there. It's really important to take time to reflect or time to ground or whatever you need, because even into toddlerhood, dealing with big emotions, how you're responding to that or what that's bringing up for you, and to teenage years. I'm going to talk about toddlers and teenagers. The in between is fine, but no, who knows? I agree. I think that's the early years are when they need us the most, and they're the most dependent on us, and they're also the ones I feel as a society, if we don't work with children or are around them, not all of us are around children a lot. Being around that can be very energetically exhausting, just physically exhausting and energetically exhausting. And it can be, you're bringing up your own stuff, whether you like it or not. And being aware of that or unaware of that takes energy.
So. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. I'm glad we kind of found a flow here.
People probably, I know somebody's going to get some benefit out of this. And I think this has been good. I think this conversation, doing and being and finding that balance, both in parenting and in just life. And if you have reflections or tips, please leave us a voice message on our lovely voicemail machine, or as we always say, email us. I just love hearing people's voices. If you have a question that you want us or a topic you want us to talk about, also please feel free to record that and send it to us. Go to justtthis.site and it's right there on that page. You can record. So we love you. Happy being.
Happy being.
Hey there, amazing listeners. We just want to say a huge thank you for tuning into our convo on the Just This podcast today. We appreciate each and every one of our listeners, and your continued support means the world to us.
If you enjoyed this episode and found value in it, we would be incredibly grateful if you could take a moment to leave us a review on your favorite podcast platform, or share this episode with someone you think would enjoy it too. Your reviews and shares not only motivate us, but they also help others discover our show.
We're also all about keeping the conversation going and hanging out with our incredible community. Head over to justthis.site, that's justthis.site, where you'll find additional resources, ways to connect with us, and join the conversation, plus some more goodies.
Thank you again for being a part of the Just This community. We'll be back soon. Until next time, remember to take care of yourself and embrace the wonder as you navigate this extraordinary adventure.